Greetings and welcome to another lecture on personality disorders. This one is going to be about the rather interesting topic of psychopathy. Now, as I mentioned before, it used to be that we kind of lumped antisocial personality disorder and sociopaths and psychopaths, and they were all kind of the same thing. Now they're beginning to get a bit separate. I still think that sociopath basically means antisocial personality disorder, but it might also mean this. Psychopathy involves 4 dimensions. The first dimension is interpersonal dimension. And these are people who are very glib, very sarcastic, lots of self-worth, pathological lying, enjoying lying to others and conning others and being the winner and putting people down and all that sort of stuff. Second, we have affective. Remember, affect is a fancy word for emotion. What we see here is a total lack of guilt and empathy. They don't feel bad about hurting other people. They cannot put themselves in other people's place. Very shallow emotions. No responsibility. Okay, and that goes along with the interpersonal. You know, they con others. It's not my fault. It's always someone else's fault. It's terrible that you made me do that sort of thing. With a lifestyle, the way they live, they're very easily bored. I mean, they have to be doing something at all times, and since a lot of what they do tends to hurt others because they don't see anything wrong with that, it doesn't generally end well. Very impulsive, irresponsible, no goals, living off other people or living off, trying to con people to get their money to live off of. When you start combining these, you can see how psychopaths are able to make living and such, because if you don't feel any guilt and you're good at conning people and you're very glib, you talk very well, you can be very charming, then, oh yeah, you could definitely see them screwing other people out of their money. Along with antisocial, they can't really control their behavior. Very often they are violent or aggressive toward other people or toward animals, particularly as children. Not following rules, not following laws, and that sort of thing. Now, in terms of outcomes in some ways, those with the first two, those with the interpersonal dimension and the affective dimension of psychopathy, are much less likely to be in jail than people with the second two. The second two have a tendency to push people into doing things that are really actively illegal, particularly if they don't really have the first two dimensions. And so a lot of times people with the first two dimensions, they can be great successes, great business people, great politicians, sometimes both. And so you can, and if they don't do anything that's blatantly illegal, then they can usually stay out of jail. Usually. Now, the clinical picture, so instead of just going over those quick dimensions, essentially we all have a part of our mind called the conscience. It's basically, if you're familiar with Pinocchio, it's Jiminy Cricket. Always let your conscience be your guide. And the conscience is that little part of your mind that tells you what's right and what's wrong, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. If we're Freudian, we would say it's part of the superego. And people who are psychopaths simply do not have that. They don't understand it. It isn't that they say, oh yes, I know that this is the right thing and this is the wrong thing, but I'm just going to do the wrong thing. They literally cannot understand other people's ethics. It's that lack of empathy, except on a verbal level. They could tell you the definitions of things like being good and kind and empathy and following rules and stuff, but they can't feel on any sort of verbal level, that it's the right thing to do. They literally do not have that little voice saying, this is right, this is wrong, don't do it. Because of the impulsivity, they very often do behaviors, and because they don't have that voice telling them what to do and what not to do, the behavior often doesn't end well. Sometimes it doesn't end well for them. They tend to be thrill seekers. They take great chances because they don't really see it ending poorly for them. They don't really understand how things can go wrong. They don't really understand what's wrong with hurting other people or other animals or whatever else. They just don't get it. And so they don't understand why it's wrong to take other people's things. So they simply take what they want. They're thrill seekers, no self-control. If they need to have it now, then they're going to take it. If they can't get it any other way, if they have to hurt people or kill people to do it, hey, I want it. It's important. I need it now. And so therefore, I'm going to take it. When you add that in, it generally, or not generally, but it often doesn't require like brute force and violence to do that. Because very often, particularly people who are higher on those first two dimensions, they can pretty much talk people into doing whatever they want them to. On the surface, these are wonderful people. I mean, once you get to know them, then you start to realize that they're not wonderful once they screw you over in particular. But they're very charming, they're very likable, they know the right things to say, they know the right things to at least do a little bit so they can get what they want. They're very good at reading others. They're almost like predators in that they can pick out the weak person, the person that has a chink in their armor that they can then go and exploit and use that person in order to get what they want. They have no idea what love is, again, except on a verbal level. They know what to say, they know how to pretend, but they don't understand what love is. They've never loved anyone. They don't understand, however you might define love. They don't. They just simply don't. And this also means that in sexual relationships, they can be very coercive. Many of them walk right up the line through sexual harassment up to the edge of rape, and some, of course, cross over. Because they don't see what the deal is. They don't, you don't want me to grab you, but I want to grab you, so I'm going to grab you. Because, I want to. And if you don't want to sleep with me, I'll charm you into sleeping with me, and I'll treat you really poorly when I do, probably, because you don't matter, only I do. And then I'm going to drop you like a hot potato. Yeah, these are not fun people to be in any kind of relationship with, whether it's friendship or lover or business or anything else. What causes this? This, like a few others, seems to be very inherited. But then it's interesting because sometimes we have that whole chicken or egg. What comes first? The characteristics of the child or the parenting of the child? It's possible that if you have a child that is deceiving and nasty and can just go for the jugular and doesn't understand love and uses your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities to hurt you, it's quite possible that you're not going to treat them perhaps as lovingly as you might otherwise. And so therefore, of course, people then point and say, well, you're a terrible parent, and that's why this person is like that. But then you could also possibly say, well, I was a great parent, but they were like that before, although you may not always be believed. They don't really feel fear. I mean, it's part of that thrill-seeking and part of all that taking chances. They don't tend to have phobias. They don't tend to get nervous about things. They just don't feel fear. And it may have something to do with the amygdala. Remember, the amygdala is a part of the brain that deals with emotions. We talked about that a little bit when we talked about the anxiety disorders. And it appears that psychopaths have slightly smaller amygdalas. So perhaps that has to do with their lack of ability to feel fear. They tend to focus on the reward and they don't focus on the punishment. A lot of times when we think about doing something, we think, well, what's the good side and what's the bad side? I just had some chocolate. The good side is the chocolate tastes very good. The bad side, of course, is that it's not good for me. It has too many calories. And so I had the chocolate. I had less of it than I might like, so I split the difference. Psychopaths just would focus on the chocolate. They don't care what happens afterwards. They don't care if it's not their chocolate. They don't care if they have to steal it or take it from someone or steal money to get it or con somebody out of it. They want it. That's just enough. The end always justifies the means if someone is a psychopath. Does not matter what they have to do. It does not matter what they have to go through. But they just want to get what they want to get. And they'll miss all the cues. They'll miss what people are telling them. They'll miss the things that we would normally see when they're hurting somebody. They just don't see it. They just don't see it. More generally, they have emotional deficits. They basically don't react as much to when other people are hurt. We can wire people up, basically. And we can look at how people react to seeing other individuals being hurt. And a normal individual, when they see another person being hurt, they're going to react in some way. But in a lot of cases, psychopaths do not. They don't react at all when they see other people being hurt. They don't react at all when they see, something bad might be happening. And in fact, a number of people, when they see other people being, a number of psychopaths, I should say, when they see others being hurt, they like that. They find that exciting. They find that fun. They may find it erotic. And so they may react, but in the absolute opposite way that they should be reacting. This is one of the things about psychopaths, is they can lie and show no physiological reaction whatsoever. And that is why lie detectors do not work on them. And lie detectors have problems anyway, because they don't detect lies. They detect emotional reactions to things. But if you're a psychopath and somebody hooks you up to a lie detector and asks you a question to which you lie, you're going to show absolutely no emotional response to that. And the lie detector is going to say they are telling the truth. So, yeah, it really is difficult to read these people because they don't show the normal human reactions. Now, we're having a bumping problem. There we go. Now, what may be causing this is indeed maybe parenting. Again, it's difficult to say whether this is the chicken or the egg. It's difficult to say whether the parenting issues came first or came second. But we do see histories of parental rejection, of abuse, and neglect in those who are diagnosed as sociopaths, or excuse me, as psychopaths. Okay? We do see this, but again, we don't know whether there is a genetic diathesis, and this is the stress that brings it out. We don't know if this creates the diathesis. We don't know if this is a reaction to something that's already there. We simply don't know, because we cannot really follow people from the start. Although I suppose it's possible, because it does seem to have a genetic influence, but it's difficult to get people to agree to have their possibly psychopathic children followed from birth. I suspect, particularly if the parent is a bit on the psychopathic side themselves, they're not going to agree to this. Thus ends part 1 of Psychopathy. I will do the second half in the next video.